Yeah, hello and welcome to this video which covers round 10 of the Tata Steel tournament for 2017. This round had a couple of interesting decisive games, so I want to focus on those. There were a couple of draws that were quite interesting, in fact, but yeah, let's focus on the games that had a decisive result. Let's talk about the draws though quickly. There was Van Vele playing Giri, the Dutch duel. Was a super solid draw. Nothing much happened. I think it's yeah, Van Vele played a save opening and not much happened. Hari Krishna Carlsen also not too exciting. Hari Krishna with white played the Rui Lopez four knights, the Spanish four knights, which is yeah, kind of it's extremely difficult to do something against. Carlsen tried around a bit, but yeah, it was difficult. So a draw at the end. Elyanov Vai was in fact quite interesting. There were some interesting moments at the end, but it ended in a draw. Maybe Elyanov had some chances, but it was a draw. And Adiban Nepomniachtchi was a very complicated game with some wild complications. Kind of clear, right? Complicated and complications. There were some clear chances for Adiban to win this game, but it was, I guess, yeah. Sometimes positions are just too difficult for human players, and yeah, at the end it was a draw. So let's focus on the decisive games. We have Karyakin white playing Andreikin, and we have a Italian game with d3. Yeah, very much in fashion nowadays, and yeah, I think we've seen those kind of moves yeah, quite often. Andreikin here playing with a5. This is an interesting way of playing this. I usually go a6 in those positions and always wonder if this is the right approach, as a5 does have some points. I mean, it prevents any b4 moves, and this in itself is quite helpful, so you don't get yeah, pushed back on the queen side. Of course, having weakened b5 is not so nice, but it probably is the better option. I really have to look into this. So all those moves look super normal. Bishop e6 here played by black, and Karyakin just yeah, ignores this basically and allows potential capture. Yeah, this is what Andreikin did. Transferring into this kind of setup is oftentimes I feel a bit more comfortable for white, because he has a good control over d5 and white has more space due to this control. So I'm always reluctant to take there and give white this double pawn. Still, there's nothing particularly wrong with it. I'm just saying it's not something that I consider too much of a problem for white, that he has the double pawn. In fact, I think white doesn't mind at all. Yeah, a4 is probably a good idea. Use the a file. Some maneuvers. Or use the a file is probably the wrong way to put it, but like get rid of the a pawn and potentially open the a file. Yeah, so all this looks, I think, fairly normal, fairly logical. And we see now an interesting idea by Karyakin. He plays knight h5 and Andreikin goes back. There was nothing wrong, I believe, in simply trading, yeah, like this, and maybe think about f5. But knight d7 was the choice. Yeah, and here, I don't know. I probably would have tried to avoid this position now that Karyakin goes for queen g4. I mean, with black, I probably would have liked to avoid that. Yeah, there's the mate threat, and the only convenient way to handle this is to trade queens. And now, I know it looks funny, white getting another double pawn, but I think this is pretty nice. Yeah, those three pawns, they give white a pretty good grip over the position and give him some space advantage. The pawns are not weak. I think this is quite okay for white, even though it's probably not an advantage. I think the key moment comes a little bit later. Knight f5, interesting, forcing black to take. And now, of course, not g takes. Yeah, g takes is capturing towards the center, but much more interesting is to take with the e-pawn so that the knight gets the square. Yeah, white doesn't mind this double pawn construction. Doesn't matter at all. And knight e4 now becomes an idea. Yeah, black stops that with, or let's say black controls the square with d5. And now we get this situation. And I think here it's a critical moment. Black plays b4, white takes, and now he played the move d4. And it seems that this is getting black into some serious trouble. Rook a d8 was probably the better choice. A b8, the better choice, looking at this pawn. For example, or the idea is knight c8. Yeah, so if we just make a normal looking move, something like this, then knight c8, for example, is going to be played. And something like that. Black gets this back. The problem with this move, d4, is that, well, white is not going to lose the pawn anytime soon. He will keep this passer, and it gives two important squares for the knight, in particular e4. I really believe that black now is in some trouble. Rook a5, and knight comes back to e4. That's a great square now. And b5. This in turn secures the c6 square. And we will see that this is important. White quickly gets the rook there. Yeah, and you know, the b pawn is just dangerous. It's not a good position for black. He's in deep trouble. And I honestly believe it's hard to save the position. Yeah, I think that move d4 really got black into huge trouble. He played knight c3. And now knight d2. And note that this is a good square. It's a safe square. Can go to c4. And the black pawns, they don't do all that much. The knight here is stopping them very nicely. The b pawn is dangerous.
Check.
b7, d2. But white manages to keep the important pawn there. Yeah, this is a winning position. It just requires good technical play. And of course, Karjakin has that technique. Now we get the famous rook behind the pawn. The best possible situation in almost all cases. If you have a passed pawn, the rook belongs behind the pawn to give it an extra boost, so to say. So the pawn is just pushed forward. And white is
check.
Not worried about the king side. His king is just a lot quicker to the action. b5.
Check.
And g4 is the simplest solution. If black takes, white captures this and
check.
Now runs towards the pawn and promotes it. Yeah, and this is also not a big difference. Rook f2 for rook f5. Yeah, and white picks up everything. So a very clean win here for Karjakin here against Andreykin. It looked like black is okay if he is avoiding this d4 move, rook a b8. I mean, I think that he probably could have done or could have solved his problems more easier. Like here, for example, with this f5. I think this is easier than what he did, but it wasn't bad. It just required extreme precision. Now here the b pawn is a bit of a weakness, and after he had given up the pawn, he just didn't manage to get it back. Okay, so a win for the last World Championship challenger. Next game, and this is now tough because I tend to show the most interesting game at the end. It's tough to choose, but I think I'll probably go with this order. We have the game of the current tournament leader Wesley So playing white against Radoslav Wojtaszek, and So goes for c4, and we transpose into a Catalan opening. Wojtaszek plays bishop e7. Probably it's right to call it the classical defense. It's the most solid defense. And now an interesting choice by the American player, queen to c2. This is a little twist compared to castles. If white castles, black will most likely play the main line with the capture on c4, and then we get probably queen c2, a6, a4, or queen c4, which is arguably the main line of the Catalan in itself. Queen c2 is interesting for a couple of reasons. The main point is that if black now wants to play in the same way, like taking and then opting for a6, b5, white has additional options now. One idea is to take, and now after a6, not to castle, but use this move differently. Castling would be just a transposition, but white can play the immediate queen c2 and wait for black to play b5 and use the tempo differently, or you can play bishop f4. Both is interesting. There's also the move knight bd2, which I have played in this position. This tries to take this with the knight, which would be very comfortable. It has to be said that a position like this, black has to be very careful to go into, because long term the bishop on g2 might prove to be far more effective than the bishop on c8. Castles, rook d1, bishop f4, white is also quicker in development. Queen c2 is an interesting move. The best defense for black is what Wojtaszek played, c5. Now white can take on c5 or castles, that was played, and now knight c6. Here the most common choice is actually to take on d4. Knight takes, and now black has a choice. He can play various moves. Knight c6, e5, queen b6, all those moves are possible. e5, for example, was played by Vichy Arnand in a game, and well, Arnand is Wojtaszek's boss. Wojtaszek is one of the main seconds of the world champion, the former world champion. So e5 wouldn't have been a surprise, or this line wouldn't have been a surprise, but Wojtaszek plays knight c6 and played so quickly, so it's certainly part of preparation. Yeah, white took on c5, d4. Black is grabbing space. However, this leads to a position type that I like for white. Let's see what happens. Rook d1, a3 first. Yeah, I forgot about that. a3 first, getting this threat in. So black plays a5. Note that if you take it here immediately, then after b4, that is a nice position. White has chances to put lots of pressure on the pawn here. For example, like here you can go b5, and this is lacking a bit of protection. a5, rook d1, e5, and now a very nice idea. Knight c3 is played using the pin on the d file, and after bishop takes, knight d5. So the white knight all of a sudden managed to jump into d5. We have to first see that black cannot take this piece, as here we have a double attack in a way. Attacked, attacked. And queen takes is answered with knight g5. And the mate threat and simultaneously attacked queen on d5 is a complete disaster for black. He played the move h6. That was necessary. Knight g5 was a huge threat anyway. Okay, bishop d2. Still played very quickly by Wesley So. The idea seems to be just to push b4 on the queen side, quickly getting an attack going. Yeah, and Wojtaszek now played a4. Looks very logical. However, after bishop b4, again played immediately, White seems to be better. He took this, a takes, and we see that now the a4 pawn is under pressure. Black took d5, and white took the bishop. Yeah, now the bishop, the knight is hanging on d5 and goes to b4, after which queen d2 is the obvious move. Knight went back. There is nothing else basically. And now b4. Yeah, in this position it doesn't look like much if you check it first. But if you look at this for a little bit longer, you recognize that this position is difficult for black. The problems that black faces are the center, this d4, e5, is a little bit unstable. Yeah, b5 is always an idea for white, pushing the knight away, and then e5 would hang. The a4 pawn is a passer, but also mostly a weakness. This pawn is pretty much unsupported. And, which is a factor in the game, the white knight might come to d6. Knight f3 to d2 to e4 to d6. And black does not have much activity. I believe that this position is already quite problematic. It doesn't look like much, but I don't think black is very happy here. Maybe you can improve now his play with bishop e6, but let's have a look what Wojciech played. Queen to e7, queen b2. This is a good move. It clears the square for the knight route. It also prepares b5, potentially followed by queen to b4. And this is also what happened in the game. Bishop g4 was played, and now first rook e1. It's a good move, preparing this, covering e2 so that you can move the knight. Rook d8 was played, and now knight d2, as mentioned. You could argue that black could take this knight to prevent this, but I think this position is also quite favorable for white. Note that he wouldn't take with the bishop, but very likely with the pawn, intending to play f4. The bishop would be much stronger than the black knight here. So we have this regrouping with knight d2, and now bishop e6. Maybe here d3 was an idea, simply to make it more murky. After murkier, I don't know. But one thing I do know, that this position is not good because after b5 the black knight doesn't have a good square. He went to b8 and now queen b4. And now we see weak, and white has 3 pawns basically against 1. Combined with the bishop, this is now very, very bad for black. I don't think you can save this position. It's really bad. f5 and knight b3. Yeah, going towards a5. And now the pawn on b7 was just taken. Looks a bit weird, but what is black supposed to play? What is he supposed to play? White wants to take the a4 pawn and then put the knight on a5 and win b7 basically. Are you supposed to keep the knight on b8 for the rest of the game? It's a complete disaster, really. Takes. Yeah, and so now he plays the whole game absolutely perfectly. I mean, every move is just spot on. Rook a4, just ignoring that the bishop is attacked because there is this fork. Note this. So black does not have anything else. He takes here and now has to play like that. Yeah, this position it's totally lost. If black now recaptures on d7, then white starts to push the pawns. And note, something like that is just going to be, it's going to be a new queen very soon. In the game, he took here. Yeah, okay. Takes, and he calculated this till the end now. Rook c1. It's quite nice. If black now captures, this is very easy. So back to e6. And here white also has a clean win with rook c8.
Check.
And at the end b6, you cannot prevent the knight jump, and b7 leading to an endgame, a piece up. That was an extremely well played game by So. He got a nice position out of the opening. I mean, this is here very good opening prep. He got this from preparation basically, and white's position is quite more comfortable than black's. Black drifted into a tough situation so quickly here. This position, I think, is very difficult for black already. He has to be super precise. And after he missed, I think, this final opportunity to play some d3 here to just make it a bit more imbalanced. After that, I think here, after this and knight b8, queen b4, he's basically lost. So a super clean win for, you see the world number 3? Maybe, yeah? Should be world number 3. Wesley So. A very good tournament again. He had an extremely lucky game at the beginning when he was completely lost against Report and won this, but he played absolutely brilliantly the other games. So very good win. Let's look at the final game, and you see that I like this game a lot. So if I show something else as the final game, that must be a really good one. So let's go for Aronian's white game here against Report. We have a Queen's Indian. So the Hungarian player goes for a very solid opening this time. He plays the same variation of the Queen's Indian that he had played in that mentioned game against Wesley So. Report had a really nice position there and then spoiled it. So bishop d2, bishop f6. Yeah, and here the most normal moves are rook c1 or queen c2. I'm not completely certain what was played in the So game. Probably rook c1. I would need to look that up, but one of those. Aronian now plays the move bishop e1. This is an extremely rare continuation. I mean, I've found like just a handful of games. It's quite uncommon. The main idea seems to be to simply prevent the black knight from being able to take the bishop on d2 and somehow force black into take on c3. Okay, rook e8 was played. Queen c2. And I know it sounds tough, but I think the next move already gets black into huge problems. And maybe it shows a little bit, I don't know, the lack of experience that Report has with these positions. It's hard to say, but that move really is bad. It's just bad. He played d5, and we will see in the game why this is a problem. In general, playing d5 in the Queen's Indian is not uncommon, but you rarely allow this kind of structure with taking and d-takes. It's, however, mostly concrete problems that arise here. White goes to d2, and now it's mostly tactical, concrete play that gives black the problems now. Here, black only has two moves to check the captures on d4. If you don't take on d4 now, white will take on e4 or play e3 and then take on e4, just being a full center pawn up. So black has to take. In the game, he took with the bishop. We can look at queen takes. It doesn't seem to be much better. White takes on e4 with the knight and threatens knight takes f6 check, picking up the bishop. It's funny, but the only move that now does not lose immediately is bishop c6. Bit of a sick looking move, but it's the only move that again does not lose immediately. After bishop c3, however, white has the better chances here as well. For example, after queen takes,
check,
knight takes, and now e4, intending to switch the queen over to the king side. Black is under tremendous pressure. I think this position is very likely also very bad. So in the game, he did not take with the queen, but with the bishop. Yeah, and now Aronian plays this whole game really nicely. Of course, you can just take on e4 now and probably claim an advantage. But the move rook d1 is also very nice. It just threatens now discoveries with the knight, trapping it, basically the bishop, I mean, and yeah, use this pin. So black now, again, has a limited choice. He can play the move f5 or move the queen, basically. After f5, white is immediately striking here because of that pin. For example, after bishop takes, pawn takes, and queen takes, white is threatening to just win this and then be a pawn up with a winning position. So black has to at least grab a pawn. But this is also looking very problematic for black. It seems unlikely that he's not going to lose one of the queenside pawns. In the game, Report played queen to c8, stepping out of the d-file. However, here, after knight takes, we see that if we look at the board as two areas, king side and queen side. Just look at the king side. On the king side here, there is just the black king on g8 and the rook on e8. There's lots of stuff on the queen side here. And this is not defending currently. White has a couple of pieces that are potential attackers. The knight, of course, the queen also, bishop might come, and this bishop might come. This is the coming attack now was for me very reminiscent of games by Alekhine, who had this quite often, playing some d4 position that looked like focused on the queen side, like hanging pawns or an isolated pawn, something like that. And all of a sudden, because the black player was somehow busy on the queen side defending, he switched everything to the king side and got a mating attack. This position is very difficult for black. I mean, I know it sounds harsh, but maybe you cannot save this anymore. It really is. It seems difficult to do. Report played bishop c5. The bishop was hanging after all, and now, of course, Aronian is not going for something. For something like knight takes c5, playing for a small, I don't know, strategic advantage. This is something where you have to play for checkmate. Anything else is just not the purpose of the game. So, knight g5. Let's just go. Mate on h7 is the idea. Yeah, black has a tough time here. Even f5 probably has to. g6 looks also pretty awful after something like this, where the white knight is aiming to go to f6 via e4. Note that here the move knight d7 is simply not possible because white is better developed. That's probably just totally awful for black. Yeah, so f5 was played, and now after the trade, Aronian activated the bishop here on c3. Yeah, it's a very nice position. Black here has to be now extremely circumspect not to lose immediately. Something like h6, okay, this is pretty naive, but still, h6, white is just, of course, going to take here. I can take here. I can also check first.
Check.
This is probably stronger, yeah?
Check.
Yeah, and black gets killed. I mean, white is attacking with everything here. Or alternatively,
check.
Something like that is probably ending in a mate. So h6 does not work. Knight d7 does not work. He played bishop f8, at least getting the bishop back to a defensive, somewhat defensive position. And now, of course, every move should be powerful. You need to use the momentum. So e4, breaking this open. h6 by Report. Yeah, there's probably nothing else. Yeah, you cannot just, f5 hangs. So you have to do something, and well, taking is out of the question. So h6. And now, of course, not some lousy retreat, but check the most aggressive moves. Aronian took on f5. This is strong. And yeah, again, probably black is beyond saving. So what's going on here? Can black take the knight? That is actually what Report did, and I think it's the best practical decision. Just take the piece and hope that you survive somehow, that the opponent is doing something bad. After pawn takes, for example, white is just going to use all the pieces, something like that. It's extremely powerful. You have to look at a position like that, for example, and see white is a piece down, but all three pieces are perfectly placed and are attacking. And this stuff is not doing much. Black is not cannot put up any stiff resistance here. Note that, for example, if he moves the c-pawn, something like rook e8 is totally paralyzing him. You don't necessarily have to mate immediately here, as you sometimes probably can just yeah, pin him to death. Yeah? Bishop e5 or something like that could be a deadly pin. In the game, he took the knight, and now Aronian played f6 very nicely, opening up this diagonal for the queen. Yeah, okay, he tried the move c5. Engines point out that c6 could be a bit tougher, but at the end this is also an extremely strong attack. White needs to use all pieces. f4 is a good move, opening up everything, and yeah, something like that is a very nice end. And black has a hard time to move anything, as knight d7 is just going to be answered by
check, check,
by this. So yeah, what are you supposed to play? Knight a6, then f5 is going to be the decisive move, and black just gets killed. Yeah, he tried c5, after which again f4 was played, using every single piece. Like here the rook, black played here, and now very nicely f5. Yeah, just getting the second f pawn into the game. If black now takes on f5, white is just going to recapture, threatening f7, and well, this move doesn't help. And how do you stop f7? Guess you don't. You can take, but then knight rook g5 is very nice. Yeah, takes.
Check.
Yeah.
Check.
And black is not going to last long. He took this, but after the capture on e6, the white idea queen g6 now is of course very strong. That was covered, but queen g2 now attacked the rook. Yeah, black has to save that. So knight a6, but this in turn allows rook d7. So very nice attacking play. Queen h5. Yeah, there was bishop e7 as well, but this is also a bit too strong. Now threatening to take 2 times on e7 with the rook hanging, and yeah, you're not going to save it. Queen h5 was played. Yeah, rook f6, rook d8. Yeah, and now the final
check
combination here was rook takes f8. Yeah, and here he actually still played a move. After rook takes, there's rook g7.
Check.
Winning easily. And this is what Report played.
Check.
And after queen to f1, he resigned. Yeah, we have this finish coming up.
Check. Check.
And white is going to checkmate very quickly. So a very nice attacking game here by Aronian, very much in the style of Alekhines. We have to really take note that it feels very difficult to give black some advice after he played d5. I feel a bit reluctant to call this, yeah, almost decisive, but I don't really see a huge improvement for black. He would be at least in severe trouble anyway, even if you try different moves. So a good win here for the Armenian number 1. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed the coverage for round 10. The Thursday, 26, is a rest day, and after that we have Friday, Saturday, Sunday as the final rounds, and I'll be back, of course, with coverage of those 3 final rounds as well. It looks great now for So, who's a point ahead of the field. He will probably win this tournament. It seems like he's unbeatable in a way, and if he doesn't lose a game, it seems difficult for somebody to catch him. Yeah, thanks for watching. Bye bye.